Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Autumn and I am coming at you with a cozy reading vlog. I initially started a different book that was going to be the first book for this video. I started it a little earlier this morning and I've already DNF'd it. So we're starting this vlog out great. Terrific. I want to talk about that first book, but I did end up picking up another book. I've read about 60 pages of that book and I'm really enjoying it, so I'm gonna stick with that book. But the first book I want to talk about is You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Bayron. I am so sad I did not enjoy this book. It's a very short read. It's a young adult slasher. It's a relatively short book. I thought it was gonna be something I could sit down and just bang out this morning, but things don't always go to plan. We are following our main character, Charity. She has a summer job at this camp called Camp Mirror Lake. It is a summer job that reenacts this classic film called The Curse of Camp Mirror Lake, and she plays the final girl. A few reasons as to why I ended up DNFing this book. I just did not like the writing style in this story. It felt very clunky and it was odd, and there were a lot of interesting word choices in this story that I did not feel comfortable with. There is an audience for this book, it's just not for me. And I knew that going into this book that I was not going to be the target audience, but I risked it for the biscuit anyways, and I burnt the biscuit. This was totally on me. I will probably unhaul this book. The other book I want to talk to you guys about that I am really loving, it is Valiant Ladies by Melissa Gray. And this book is actually one of my 24 and 24. We follow our two main characters, Kiki and Anna. They are ladies during the day and swashbuckling rogues by night. Kiki and Anna are best friends, but they're in love. They are forbidden to be together because Kiki is betrothed to another. However, on the night of Kiki's engagement announcement, Kiki's brother is murdered. Kiki and Anna have to go on an adventure to pretty much solve her brother's murder. I really enjoy Kiki and Anna. I think that they are two very beautifully crafted characters who can stand alone by themselves. They warm your heart when they're both in the same room. This book is kind of giving me vibes of, I cannot remember the name of this book, but I'm gonna put this book here. This book kind of reminds me of this book, but so far I feel like this one is done a lot better. The writing is a little stronger. I feel like the story itself is a lot better crafted. This book I gave 3 stars, I think. I am very much enjoying this book. And the brother that does eventually get murdered, he is already present in the book. He seems like a very nice, sweet, a big brother that just gives you a bear hug. And I'm really scared to get to the point of what happens with the brother and what all goes on with that. I do want to read you guys a line. It is not spoilery at all because it's literally on page 1. I would say so far the only thing, I don't even want to say bothered me, where the story started, I feel like the author could have cut out about 3 paragraphs and started it on this one line. I'm gonna read you another line that's just like 2 paragraphs down. I think the author should have started it on this sentence instead. When I read that sentence, it just hit me and I was like, oh, that's a really good line. And it almost made me wonder if maybe the author should have started it there, but that's just a personal preference. This is the first line that the author has. It's a shame we're about to do this in a tavern. Admittedly, it's already a shithole, but it's our shithole, mine and Anna's. And this is the line I feel like she should have started it on. I tilt my head back to look the man in the eye. Never take your eyes off your opponent. That is the first rule of swordplay. We aren't playing and this isn't a game, but the rules still apply. I feel like that would have been a really great line to kick off the story. Where she started it is just fine, but I just felt immediately attached to Kiki with that line I just read versus the first one. But that's just like a personal preference. I'm gonna continue to read this book for a little bit more today, and I will give you guys an update later. It's raining outside, which is why it's very dark. I want to give you guys a final update. I have read about 100 pages. It's cute, it's sweet. I really love the writing. There are a lot of clever lines in here. I want to annotate them just a little bit. I looked her up on Instagram and she seems really fun and quirky. She doesn't post a whole heck of a lot on social media, which is kind of a bummer, but I do really enjoy this book. I'm about 25% of the way through it. We still haven't quite gotten to the part where her brother is murdered, and that's not a spoiler because that is in the synopsis, which I find quite interesting that we're 25% of the way through and that key part in the synopsis hasn't happened yet. A lot of other things have happened in this story that are in that same realm of murder, and I am kind of digging it. Like, I do love a little murder side plot or just a murder plot in general. I do like the way this is going. I enjoy the characters. We have a really nice solid basis of all of the characters. We've met our main character's dad, her brother, the lover, which is also the other main character. We're getting her perspective as well. And we've met a few other people who are friends and acquaintances. I am also trying to figure out this murder mystery plot. This is a fun little read so far. I didn't want to go in with crazy high expectations, especially coming off of a book that I DNF'd. And that's something I've realized with myself. When I DNF a book because I have high expectations of it, the next book I pick up, I have to kind of lower my standards a little bit. I'm also enjoying the plot. I'm assuming within the next couple of chapters what's talked about in the synopsis is going to happen because they're at the location of the engagement announcement. So it said that those two things happened at the same time. I will give you guys a few more updates when I probably finish the book, or maybe when I get 2/3 of the way through, I'll give you one more update. I just have a few other things that I have to do, but I really want to keep reading so bad because it's raining outside. I finished it. It is a solid 3 stars for me. I think the last time we talked, I had read about 100-ish pages, I believe, and the book in total is a little less than 370 pages. I think it's a cute story. I had a lot of fun with it. I wouldn't say it was super high stakes, although there is a murder plot line which pretty much dictates this entire story. It was middle of the road for me. It wasn't really bad, and it wasn't the best story I ever read. I do think I like this author's writing style. I think she has really unique ideas. While there wasn't anything I would say necessarily wrong with this story, it just fell a little flat. There weren't a lot of stakes. I like my stories when they're kind of twisty and turny, no matter what genre, whether it's fantasy or horror, which are the two main genres I pretty much read. I do like when there is a lot that's going on. With this story, I felt like that initial problem in the story was the only thing that we were chasing after. For the most part, I felt like the story could have gone a little bit deeper, and it didn't, if that makes any sense. The writing style was not terrible. I don't feel like the story itself was absolutely terrible. I think the two audiobook narrators were spectacular. They were very similar in the way that they sounded when I was listening to it while I was washing the dishes and things like that, and I wasn't actually looking at the book. There were a few moments where I was like, wait, who's telling this story? Oh, that's right, it's Kiki, or oh, it's Anna. So I guess that's one thing that I also didn't quite enjoy with this story, is I think the author could have been a little more clear with our two main characters. If you had taken out the two points of view and had just written it all under either Kiki or Anna, it didn't really make a difference with who was telling the story. I did annotate a little bit in here because there were some really awesome lines that I loved. Wanted to see if I could find one of the ones that I underlined because I really did appreciate that line but I can't remember where it was. Here it is. I won't give you any context. I don't think it'll spoil anything. This is what it says. I do believe in this. We are more than flesh and bone. There is something undefined, something unknowable that makes us who we are. Something that makes us people. It is the thing that makes us smile, makes us laugh, makes us cry, and makes us grieve. It is what makes us love and hate. It makes us human. I really love that paragraph. And there were a few other things I did annotate in here because they were a little confusing. I don't think that was the author's intention. So there were a couple of parts where our two main characters, Kiki and Anna, they were trying to break into a castle or someone's residence. Kiki was trying to pick the lock, and Kiki is our high noble woman. Anna is the one who is our street urchin. Kiki was trying to pick the lock, and Anna was impressed, and she was like, when did you learn how to pick locks? And Kiki, she said, oh, I read it in a book one time. It felt like a plot convenience in that particular moment when I read it, because then further on into the story, maybe at the 70-75% mark, Anna was picking a lock. We were in her head, and she said something along the lines of, I've always known how to pick locks because as a street urchin, you have to learn how to be resourceful. I was a little confused. I was like, why was Kiki picking the lock then? And now you're picking this. I don't know. It just felt weird. There was another thing. I wrote it down. I keep notes in my phone, but I send them as text messages to myself because if I put them in a notes document, I would completely lose them. There was a point when Kiki was picking a lock, but before that, the two of them were arrested and they were put in jail, but they didn't pick their way out of jail or pick the lock to break out of jail at that point. And of course, there could have been a number of reasons as to why. If they broke out of jail, that could have unleashed a whole bunch of other ridiculous things that the author probably didn't want to go down that path. But I just found it a little bit of a plot convenience that at the time when they were put in jail, they didn't try to pick themselves out of the jail cell. They just sat there and then waited for one of the other characters to bail them out, versus both of them being fully competent enough to pick the lock and then they did not pick the lock. That just kind of bothered me, and that's probably just nitpicking. I just wanted to share that about this because there were just little minor things kind of like that happened in this story. With like 30 pages left in this book, a total random god was just presented, the sun god's elephants. It said something like that, and it felt very out of place. We didn't really get a lot of descriptions about the gods or the religion in this story, but we didn't ever really have a reference to that sun god or sun king before that moment, and we were well into this story. But that could have just been me nitpicking. Did I miss something? And who knows, maybe I did miss something. I don't know if it's going to be a book I'd ever reread, but I do think it'd be one to recommend for those reasons that I stated before. I have two books that I'm not quite sure which of the two I want to read. I do have an audiobook for a nonfiction book. It's only like 3 hours. I probably won't talk too much about this book, but it's the next book I'm going to be listening to, and it's called Teach Yourself How to Learn Strategies You Can Use to Ace Any Course at Any Level by Sandra Yancey McGuire with Stephanie McGuire. It is just a 3-hour nonfiction book, just giving you strategies and just different kinds of techniques on how to learn. And I originally had put this book on hold through the Libby app. I was going back to school for my master's. I'm still going back to school for my master's, but I wanted to listen to this book before I went back to school, but unfortunately that didn't happen. I still want to listen to it because I still think I can learn something from it, even though I'm pretty much done with my first semester. So the two other books I have up for us, they'll just be more of whatever I'm feeling in the moment, kind of whatever I'm vibing with. I don't think I'm gonna start either of them today. They'll be in a couple of days. I work the next 2 days and then I have some stuff to do the next few days, but hopefully sprinkled throughout the next week or so, I'll be able to get one of these books finished. It's either going to be Wild and Wicked Things by Francesca May. This book follows our main character, Annie Mason. After her father has passed away, all of his estate is obviously left to her, and he lives on this island called Crow Island. She has to go and deal with everything that has to do with his death. Interesting things are going on this island, and then we meet our mysterious and alluring Emmeline Delacroix. She is a figure shadowed by rumors of witchcraft. Soon Annie is drawn into the glittering world filled with extravagant parties, a world where the boundaries of the wicked are tested and the cost of illicit magic might be death. I did read about 30% of this book earlier this year, but I had to stop reading it because it was around a time in my life when things just got very chaotic and I couldn't concentrate. I soft DNF'd this book and it had absolutely nothing to do with the book. I just know I would not have been able to give this book a fair chance had I tried to push through it at the point in time in my life when I was trying to read this book. This one's a potential, and then the other one is What Stalks Among Us by Sarah Hollowell. So this book I mentioned in my 8 horror books I want to read for the spooky season. I have not yet obviously read this book, but it follows 2 teens, Sadie and Logan, who get lost in this corn maze, and as they continue to walk through it, they see dead bodies, but dead bodies of themselves over and over and over again. They've realized that they've died in this maze and they've been trapped in it for a really long time. I'm pretty excited because this is like a time loop. I can't wait. This is also a YA thriller. I guess I'm gonna try and give another YA thriller a shot. I'm very curious about this book. This is going to be the next one up, or it is going to be Wild and Wicked Things. When I give you guys the next update, I guess we'll see what book I ended up choosing. To give you guys an update on the book that I am reading because you guys, I am literally freaked out by this book. In my last update, I think I had told you guys I had a toss-up between either reading What Stalks Among Us by Sarah Hollowell, or I honestly can't even remember the other book, but the book I settled on was What Stalks Among Us. Last night, right before I went to bed, I was like, you know what? I am just going to read maybe a chapter to just kind of wind down for the night. I read 25 pages of this book. I am so disturbed in a good way. I am really going to like this book. I'm going to keep the same expectations that I have for myself because I'm afraid to have too high of expectations now that I am really invested into this story and then come out disappointed. I am still going to be taking it easy with this story, but in these first 25 pages, we learn so much about these characters, this author's world building. The writing in this is so well done. I am really just blown away with the storytelling. This book pretty much is right out the gate them in the maze. It's wild. And the way that the story is broken up, because they're stuck in a time loop, I think if I was only listening to the audiobook, I would be a little confused. In the physical book, it has like those page breaks when they're at one point in the story versus another point in the story. And there is this visual with this author's writing that is truly spectacular. There's a certain scene in this book, and I think it's within the first 10 pages, so it's not necessarily a spoiler, but the way that this author describes how one of the characters is looking at one of the other characters as they're entering the maze, she's talking about where it kind of looks like a glitch, and just the imagery in that scene was enough for me to be sold on the story. 15 pages later, after reading that, I'm still really invested into this story. And I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm having a lot of fun. And honestly, it's scaring the heck out of me. I think all of those feels and all of those emotions are exactly what the author wants me to feel. And that to me is amazing storytelling. But I have to get back to work. And I had to give you guys this update. Did you hear that? That was my ankle. I'm okay. I'm fine. It's a little chilly in here and I slept on wet hair. We're winning today. I am excited to say that I did end up finishing What Stalks Among Us. I finished this on Sunday. It's currently Thursday, but I worked for the last 3 days. I let myself kind of simmer in my review before I wanted to sit down and talk about it. I am giving this book, I'm not gonna keep holding it up, but this book, I am giving it 3 stars. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I think for what it was an okay book. I do think if I was the target audience for this book, it could have been a 4 or 5 star read. So I want to talk about the things that I did enjoy about this book, and then I'll talk about the things I didn't necessarily love about this book. For this book, book, I did really love the platonic relationship between our main character Sadie and her friend Logan. I thought they were very sweet together, and I really loved their banter. The two of them together were really well done. I feel like that they're beloved characters, and I really wouldn't mind if I saw more of them in this story. They're seniors in high school, and it's briefly mentioned that they're going to be going to the same university once they graduate high school. If there was a book 2, I could be interested in it because I loved those two main characters. I don't think it would be possible with this setting of this story because of the events that happened in this book. I loved these characters so much, and I really enjoyed seeing them on page together. I do think that Sadie is a character that some people can really resonate with and see themselves in her. So she is a neurodivergent character, and she does struggle a lot with anxiety and a lot of social anxiety. A lot of the situations that she was put in, I could see how some people could relate to Sadie. A few things about Sadie were a little repetitive. There could have been a little bit more depth to her character, and not necessarily with Logan, but some of her other relationships that were talked about in this story. I think it was fine for what it was and for it being a YA story, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it had to be cut short. And when I say cut short, I don't mean that the story ended abruptly or anything like that. The story does get wrapped up in the end. There's no cliffhanger, there's no what ifs. It very much does end when the book ends. And those are how I typically prefer my books to be. But I'll be honest, when I went into this book, I wasn't quite sure if we were going to get a wrapped up ending. So I appreciated that from the author. The author did, Crash, let's not put our face there, please. I did appreciate that the author had that ending wrapped up nicely and there weren't really anything that wasn't tied up. So I did appreciate that. If that is something that you like about your stories, this book definitely does do that. However, I would look at the trigger warnings. Another thing I appreciated about this story was that the author did have all of their trigger warnings listed on their website. I did go to their website and check those out. There are certain things that I don't really particularly care to read about. All of my triggers were not in this book, but please do look up the trigger warnings. There is a lot of self-harm in this book and a lot of blood and gore. It might be something you have to pass on. I don't know if you guys can hear what they're doing outside, but they are doing all types of lawn care right now, and it just bothers me because it's 8:30 in the morning, and I thought that this would have been a good time to have a conversation with you guys. Sorry if there's a lot of background noise. A few of the things that I didn't quite care for with this story. For one, I think this book was too long. It is 380-ish pages, I believe. And I think if this book had been about 100 pages shorter, it would have worked out a little bit better because I felt like Act 2 sagged and it was a little boring because we kept reliving those same moments. And I know they're stuck in this maze in some type of weird time loop, but I do think we have to kind of mix it up a little bit. And if we can't mix it up and be a little creative with it, then I think the story should have been a lot shorter. So we learn in the story that there are other people who had gotten trapped in this maze before. Apparently like hundreds and thousands of people who had gotten stuck in this maze before. We only see one or two of those people. They're not so much themselves anymore. They have been taken by this maze. So they have become part of this weird corn maze time loop thing. I would have liked to have seen more of that because I think that would have been a lot of really cool world building, and to have seen people like the other people who've been trapped in this maze at different stages of morphing into the maze. I think it would have been really cool to have witnessed that and not just had, oh, here's Sadie and Logan in the maze and they're fighting to get out, and then here's everybody else who didn't get out. I also have a few questions about what made Sadie and Logan super special. Why were they apparently the key? And we never really learned that answer. There's also one thing that really bothered me with this book. This isn't necessarily going to be a spoiler, but there is this certain type of skeleton that appears throughout the story. I mean, I'm talking about every other page, 4 times a chapter. This thing is talking to Sadie in her mind. I was led to believe, oh, it's part of the maze. It's how the maze is trying to latch onto her and to get her to succumb to the maze. We never learn anything about that thing that is talking to Sadie inside her mind. And if you go online and you look at some of the reviews, some of the other reviews also had a similar issue with me. They were like, what does it mean? I wish I knew, and I guess there were some other people that were also on that same page as me where they didn't know either. So that made me feel good that I wasn't the only person that was like, WTF. I am really annoyed that we never got anything else about that one certain thing that was talking to Sadie in her mind. There is representation in this book. Both of our two main characters are bisexual. However, none of that matters to the story. We don't really see any of it on page. I honestly feel like the author just wanted to check off boxes. And I feel like that is a very bold thing to say, but I didn't like the fact that we're just saying these characters are bisexual. I felt like if you had taken out all of those lines in the story, it wouldn't have changed anything. There were a few other things that happened in this story that I could tell the author was extremely passionate about. And as a writer myself, I understand there being certain topics and there being certain things that I'm passionate about that I want to reflect in my stories, but there's a certain way to do it. And these certain topics, I don't necessarily feel like the author did well. There were several times where our main character, Sadie, she would go on a tangent, but I immediately got pulled from the story and I felt like I was listening to the author on their soapbox. And that's not a good thing. I was immediately pulled out of the story every single time that happened. I literally could hear the author's voice and not the character who was giving that speech. And that's also not a good thing. This last thing I'm going to say, I think it's just a me thing because I'm a little bit too old for YA books like this. And I think this is why I need to be more cautious of in the future. I am not a big like pop culture reference type person. I don't particularly care for characters referencing other stories, other movies, TV shows, things like that. I don't like that. If it happens once or twice in a book, I can laugh it off, shrug it off, and we can keep moving. What I didn't like was there were so many references. We talked about Supernatural, we talked about Labyrinth, there were a couple of other ones and I can't remember what they were. It was too much for my taste. If I was younger, like late teens, maybe early 20s, I maybe would have liked those references. It's just probably just my taste in books and what I prefer and what I don't like. But I did not like the number of references that went on in this book. I think that's everything I wanted to say about What Stalks Among Us. That's pretty much my review. It's just middle of the road. It's not gonna be one I will probably ever remember. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's honestly probably a 2-star. Yeah, it's probably more of a 2-star read. I mean, I'm definitely gonna keep this book on my shelf. That is my review on What Stalks Among Us by Sarah Hollowell. I did decide on the next book that I'm gonna read for this vlog, which will be the last book, by the way, and it is The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. I have already read 10 pages of this book and I love it so far. Only 10 pages in, so anything can happen. But we've already gotten both of our main characters' POVs. It is a dual POV book, I think. I mean, I've just seen those two perspectives so far. There could be a third, who knows? I have no audiobook, I have no ebook. I am just gonna be sitting down reading the physical copy, and I am a relatively slow reader, so we'll see how long this takes for me to read this without any other type of platform to use. This one follows our two main characters, Meg and what's the other girl's name? Kat Roberts. Meg is, I'm assuming she's some type of like hitman where she gets a target. She becomes whoever you need her to be to get a job done. And 10 years ago, I guess Meg was on some type of mission in Los Angeles and it ruined Kat's life. Whatever the outcome of what happened 10 years ago affected Kat's life. Well, now Meg is back in Los Angeles. Kat has kind of tracked her down. From what I have gathered 10 pages in, it does seem like Meg has a weird feeling that somebody is watching her. I'm hoping today is going to be a nice little slow day. I can just relax, do a little bit of reading. I have a lot of video editing I have to catch up on. Little fun thing, I had to go down to the mailroom to get some mail that were in the package lockers. I wanted to open them with you guys. This first one is nothing book or writing related at all, I don't think. They're just scrunchies. I got a 36 pack and I think this was a 12 pack? 8 pack. I love wearing scrunchies. Any other type of hairband or hair bow gives me a headache. For some reason, I always lose them. They always just disappear. I decided to invest in a whole bunch of them, 36 of them, so it'll take me a year to lose all of them mysteriously. And then this next one actually is book mail. One of my author friends, she had her first book published. I should have brought scissors. And I ended up buying a couple of other books too, because I have honestly been really wanting to read these books. I want to have more cozy, little light-hearted books on my shelf. The first book that was the cozy book is The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. I have heard really great things about this book from a variety of people, so I want to be part of the cozy fun. I ended up getting book 2 in that same series. It's getting that time of year for the second book in the series, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just impulse buy. So I bought book 1 and book 2, and book 2 is the Cinnamon Bun Book Store. All it takes is a little bit of sugar and spice, and it's the same author. It is a small town spicy romance. The last book is the book from my friend who published A Diamond Bright and Broken by Holly Davis. It is just as beautiful as it appears to be online. I cannot wait to read this book, as well as the other 2 books that I purchased. I just wanted to do a little mini book haul. I finished The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark yesterday, and I want to give you guys my final chat about it, as well as close out the vlog. I am giving this book a solid 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. The last update I think I gave you guys was at about 100 pages, I think, and this book is a little less than 300 pages. You guys, the twists and the turns in this book are so amazing. I think this author absolutely crafts amazing characters. I really, really loved our main character. I think I had given this in my brief synopsis of this story, but this book follows our 2 main characters. We have Kat and Meg. Meg is a con artist. Actually, I think I had said originally she was a hit woman. She's not. She's a con artist. The story follows Meg, and she's a con artist. It follows her over about 10 years, but at the start of her con artist career, she had kind of screwed over this girl named Kat. Kat had made it her life's mission to find Meg again and bust her, basically. In this story, we follow both women's perspectives. I will say I enjoyed Meg's chapters a lot more than I enjoyed Kat's. I just think that that is just a personal preference. Like, I just really, really enjoyed Meg as a person. I loved seeing her 10 years ago and her growing up as a con artist. That sole reason why she does what she does. And I think that this author just did an absolutely phenomenal job with making Meg such a likable character, and us knowing, like the readers knowing, that what she's doing is totally wrong. But I just love the fact that she takes the law into her own hands, and she's like, I'm just gonna do this to the people that I think deserve it, and these are the people I think deserve it. I just cannot get over this book. I love the ending. It's definitely not, I wouldn't say like a cliffhanger or anything like that, but it definitely leaves it open where it's like, what could happen next? I catch myself still thinking about this book. I just finished it yesterday, but I think about how amazing this is, how amazing the characters are, but also I still think about Meg, like what would Meg do in this situation? Which is funny because our other main character, Kat, she would sometimes think that in certain situations. She'd be like, what would Meg do? I am now reading a different book, but now I constantly think of that, like what would Meg do in this situation? This was a complete win for me. I would definitely recommend this to anybody. And Laura Dave is on the top. She's one of the authors that blurbed it. And I should have known that it's pretty similar to Laura Dave. I have only read one book, and it's The Last Thing He Told Me. I think that is the name of that book. I'll leave it over here. But I really enjoyed that book, and I really liked this book too. And they're very similar-ish. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. I really enjoyed those twists and turns. I think the author, she does a great job job of making you think certain things, but then also serving you the answers on a silver platter. It's kind of like that, have them looking over here for the pen instead of this hand. You know, it's like situations like that throughout this entire book, and I really enjoyed it. So I don't live on the West Coast or anything. So when she was describing Sunset Boulevard and certain places that take place, I'm assuming on the West Coast, I do think she did a really great job of having certain landmarks and doing it in such a way where it didn't feel overpowering or kind of obnoxious throughout the story, if that makes sense. Because I know at the beginning of this video, I read a different book, What Stalks Among Us, and in that book I kept getting annoyed with some of the references, some of like those pop culture references and things like that, and it took me out of the story. This book does have some of that in here, but it's just enough to not pull you out of that story. There was one moment, this is not a spoiler, and I'm trying to think of where it was in here. I laughed out loud. Our main character, our con artist, at one particular moment, she had realized something and she literally said, I wanted to punch the air and do a happy dance on the side of the road. It was just so funny in the context of what all was happening. I loved that. There were also some really awesome lines in here that I did end up underlining with my pen, and I definitely do want to hang on to this book because I think it's something I would love to reread, and I would love to recommend and give it to my mom to read because I think she'd enjoy this book too. This was a 5-star read. Absolutely loved it. Very, very happy with this reading vlog, but also really happy with my experience reading The Lies I Tell. And this book was actually on my 24 and 24, so I'm really happy I was able to read this book, but also enjoy one of the books that was on my 24 and 24. That is going to be everything for this vlog. I feel like it went on for quite some time, but I did overall have a really great reading experience. But overall, I am really happy with this reading vlog. I had a lot of fun. I hope I put some new books on your radar. If I did, definitely let me know down in the comments below. But if you have a recommendation for me that is similar to The Lies I Tell that you think I would be interested in, also let me know that down in the comments below. But that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.